Hey guys, welcome to SourceFed. I'm Joe Beretta. Yesterday I covered a story coming out of Ontario, Canada about a lady by the name of Charlene Simon who hit 3 teenagers on their bikes, injuring 2 and killing 1 by the name of Brandon Majewski. And I went off because I read that Simon was suing the family and the dead teen for damages. Well, guess what, kids? I've got more to say. I didn't really like the way I covered it. It was reactionary, it was angry, and very malicious. And without saying it, I think I created a call to action to hate. Hate is a very exhausting emotion that doesn't require a lot of thought, so it's not something I like to preach or spread. Worst of all, I just think the video was kind of lazy. I allowed haste and emotion to push the pen in a story that I perceived as a lady accidentally killing a kid and then suing that kid. That's part of what happened, but as with most things, this tragedy is not black and white, but I presented it that way. I got all fired up and started tip-a-tapping with my fingers. I still feel many of the sentiments I felt in the previous video, and I will reiterate some of them here, but allow me to fill in the holes because for some of you who watch this stuff, I'm face value, and sometimes that's easy to forget on this side of the camera box. So now here, from what I gather, is a more robust, thorough retelling of the facts as reported by a bunch of different sources. At 1:30 a.m., Brandon and his friends were biking down this road. It was dark, it was drizzling out, nighttime driving conditions were not ideal. The boys were not wearing helmets, they wore dark clothes that had reflectors, and their bikes also had reflectors. The boys were reportedly riding side by side down the road when Charlene Simon, driving 10 kilometers over the posted speed limit, failed to see them on the road and hit them with her SUV from behind. Brandon was thrown over the car and died at the scene. It was an accident. And after an investigation, it was determined that no charges were to be filed. Tragic and horrible. But there's even more to the story. The stuff where people say things like, "What about that thing?" That night, Simon's husband, a police officer, was following her home. According to the first witness at the scene, she pulled up to Brandon lying in the middle of the road gasping for breath. She was the first to his side, not the Simons, and that's when Mr. Simon suddenly appeared asking for their location, presumably to call 911. He went back to his wife's car, and that was the last time the witness ever saw him because the Simons were allowed to leave the scene while the other witnesses were forced to stay till 5:30 in the morning when the investigation was completed. According to some reports, the witness was the one who called 911. Police reports state alcohol was not suspected and a roadside screener was administered, but no breathalyzer, which has a bunch of people crying foul. Still hasn't been determined where the Simons were coming from that night or why her husband was following her. Now, should have the kids been riding their bikes on a dark, wet road at 1:30 in the morning? Probably not. Should Charlene Simon have been driving over the speed limit on a dark, wet road at 1:30 in the morning? Probably not. The main point here is that a young man lost his life that night, and now people are hurting. Those who lost a loved one and the family of a lady that accidentally killed a kid. Can't imagine the emotional burden weighing her down, but I also can't imagine the pain of losing my 17-year-old son. And now the sides are locked in lawsuit, and herein lies the fuel to everybody's fire. I personally reacted vehemently and attacked someone who I perceived as committing an unthinkable act, suing the parents of a boy she accidentally killed, as well as the boy himself, as well as the other boys, and also the county for not maintaining the roads. Many of you have pointed out that Simon's lawsuit, in fact, is in response to a lawsuit brought on by the Majewski family, who were suing for $900,000 to cover funeral costs and emotional damage. The Majewskis contend that she was not only speeding, but also under the influence and/or texting, both of which have not been proven. The Simons' counter lawsuit claims the boys were negligent and incompetent cyclists, and the incident has caused her emotional trauma and decreased her level of happiness, which I'm sure is an absolute truth, but I still think she's in the wrong. I still detest naming the deceased kid in a countersuit, as well as suing the family at all, but I also realize that she's probably just as taken aback by a lawsuit thrown at her over an accident that she is surely grieving over. And in the court of law, sometimes when you get sued, you throw a counter lawsuit to make people drop suits. Law sucks. Now, I also learned that her husband is also suing for $100,000, and that just reeks of deplorableness to me. Now, what I wish I focused on in the previous video is the abhorrent sue-happy culture that permeates our society. It saddens me and turns my stomach. Grief can quickly evolve to anger, which evolves into a search for blame, which evolves into a search for justice and compensation. Perspective rapidly depletes in that kind of atmosphere. It sucks, it's gross, I hate it, and it ignites a fire inside me, and I focus the heat from that fire in the direction of a woman that I thought was suing a dead kid, and still kind of is. I still don't think a countersuit is appropriate, even if she does feel backed into a corner. In the end, even if it was an accident with no blame officially attributed to either side, she played a part in the death of Brandon Majewski, trying to extract money from the deceased family as a means to stop a lawsuit or cover court costs or to compensate for emotional pain will almost always lose in the court of public opinion, and she lost in mine. But if it turns out that the Simons were the first to file a suit, which would be insane, then I stand by everything that I said in that previous video. Now, for Formulate your own damn opinions and express them in the comments down below. Also, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the annotation for more news. My name is Joe Beretta. Thanks for watching SourceFed.